What if the greatest love songs in history were actually weapons in a war? What if the melodies that defined a generation were born from screaming matches, shattered relationships, and a blizzard of cocaine? This is the story of Fleetwood Mac, a band that didn't just make music, they bled it. And at the heart of that beautiful, chaotic storm was one woman, a poet, a mystic, and a survivor. For decades, Stevie Nicks has been seen as a fairy godmother of rock and roll, but the truth is far darker. Her life wasn't a fairy tale, it was a battle. This is the untold story of how the reigning queen of rock transformed betrayal, addiction, and heartbreak into a legend that will never die. Before the stadiums, the private jets, and the millions, there was just a girl, a guy, and a desperate dream. In 1968, Stephanie Stevie Nicks was a high school senior with a voice that could haunt and a heart full of poetry. It was at a party that she first saw Lindsey Buckingham, a guitarist with a fiery intensity that matched her own. He was playing California Dreamin', and she walked up and harmonized with him perfectly. In that moment, a connection was fused, a musical and romantic bond so powerful it felt like destiny. They were inseparable, moving to Los Angeles with nothing but their talent and a shared ambition. They were broke, cleaning houses and waiting tables to survive, pouring every ounce of their being into their music. Their first album, Buckingham Nicks, was a commercial failure, a devastating blow that left them on the brink of giving up. The label dropped them, and the dream seemed to be dying. But in the shadows of that failure, their relationship intensified into something possessive and all-consuming. It was a choice that would make them millionaires and tear them apart forever. By 1974, the British blues band Fleetwood Mac was in turmoil. They had cycled through guitarists and were on the verge of collapse. Mick Fleetwood, the band's lanky, eccentric drummer, was scouting a studio in LA when a producer played him a track from the failed Buckingham Nicks album. Mick was blown away, but not by Stevie's voice. He was mesmerized by Lindsey's guitar playing. He wanted him and only him. When Mick offered Lindsey the gig, Buckingham laid down an ultimatum. Stevie and I are a package deal. You take both of us, or you get neither of us. Reluctantly, Mick agreed. On New Year's Eve, 1974, Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham officially joined Fleetwood Mac. They had no idea they had just made a deal with the devil. They had found their path to fame, but they had also just lit the fuse on a bomb. The complex web of relationships in the band, with bassist John McVie and pianist Christine McVie also married, was about to become a cataclysmic mess. Fleetwood Mac was about to enter a creative inferno that would produce one of the greatest albums ever made and nearly destroy them all. The studio for the Rumours album wasn't a creative space, it was a war zone. By this point, every relationship in the band had imploded. John and Christine McVie were divorcing and not even speaking to each other. Mick Fleetwood's own marriage was ending. And the once faded love story of Stevie and Lindsey had disintegrated into a thick, bitter feud. The air was thick with tension, fueled by mountains of cocaine and oceans of alcohol. They were trapped together, forced to create while their lives fell apart, and they did it by weaponizing their music. Lindsey penned "Go Your Own Way," a vicious and direct attack on Stevie, accusing her of sleeping around. Stevie was horrified. She had to stand on stage every night and sing backup vocals on a song that was publicly crucifying her. But she didn't just take it, she fought back. Her response was Dreams, a song that was lyrically ethereal and mystical, but carried a brutal undertone. She sang about him crying when the rain washes him clean, a haunting prediction that he would one day regret losing her. They were having arguments in the studio and then writing songs about those arguments, forcing the other person to help record them. It was a level of psychological torture that few could endure. The result was a masterpiece. Rumours sold over 40 million copies, becoming one of the best-selling albums of all time. But as the band's fame skyrocketed, Stevie was spiraling into a private darkness fueled by $1 million habit. Fame hit Stevie like a tidal wave, and cocaine became her life raft. It was everywhere in the 70s rock scene, and for Stevie, it became a crutch to deal with the relentless pressure of touring and the emotional turmoil of the band. Her use escalated to a terrifying degree. She later estimated she spent over $1 million on the drug. It was a habit that was destroying her from the inside out. Her famously powerful voice began to fray, and the drug was eating away at her septum. The turning point came during a visit to a plastic surgeon. He looked inside her nose and gave her a chilling ultimatum. He told her that the next time she did a line of coke, she could have a brain hemorrhage and simply drop dead. The warning was so stark, so final, that it pierced through the haze of her addiction. She was terrified of becoming another rock and roll casualty like her idols, Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix. In 1986, she checked herself into the Betty Ford Clinic. She had survived the cocaine, but she was about to walk straight into a different, more insidious trap. In rehab, Stevie was desperate to stay clean. A psychiatrist, concerned she might relapse, prescribed a sedative called Klonopin. It was meant to be a safety net, but it became a prison. The drug plunged her into a zombie-like state. It made her gain a significant amount of weight, which, for a star known for her ethereal image, was devastating. The Klonopin stole her creativity, her passion, and her memory. She has said that the period from 1986 to 1994 is a total blackout. 8 years of her life gone. She toured for her solo album, The Other Side of the Mirror, and has absolutely no recollection of it. To her, it simply never happened. She described the Klonopin withdrawal as infinitely worse than quitting cocaine. It was a 47-day ordeal in a hospital that she called a living hell. She had been robbed of the prime of her life, not by an illicit substance, but by a prescription intended to help her. This lost decade remains one of the greatest tragedies of her life, a shadow she had to fight through to find herself again. While battling her demons, Stevie's life was struck by an unthinkable tragedy. Her best friend, Robin Anderson, was diagnosed with leukemia. Just as she went into remission, she discovered she was pregnant. To save her baby, Robin stopped her cancer treatments. She gave birth to a son, Matthew, but tragically passed away just 2 days later. Stevie was shattered, overwhelmed by grief and a desperate need to keep a part of her friend alive. She made a shocking decision. She believed it was her duty to raise Robin's son, and in her grief-stricken mind, the only way to do that was to marry Robin's devastated husband, Kim Anderson. 3 months after Robin's death, they were married. It was a union born not of love, but of shared, unbearable grief. The marriage was a disaster from the start. They were two people trying to fill a void that could never be filled. The arrangement lasted only 3 months before they both realized it was a terrible mistake. Years later, Stevie would call it the biggest regret of her life, a bizarre and heartbreaking chapter driven by a desperate, misguided heart. The volatile chemistry of Fleetwood Mac could never last. After decades of breakups and reunions, the final blow came in 2018. The band was planning another massive world tour, but old wounds between Stevie and Lindsey had reopened. According to reports, the final straw was a seemingly minor incident at a MusiCares benefit concert. Stevie felt Lindsey had been disrespectful to her on stage. It was the culmination of 40 years of conflict. She allegedly gave the band an ultimatum. It's him or me. This time, the band chose her. Lindsey Buckingham, her first love and the musical architect of so much of their sound, was fired from the band he had helped build into a global phenomenon. For many fans, this was the ultimate betrayal, the true death of Fleetwood Mac. But for Stevie, it was an act of self-preservation. While the band's drama made headlines, Stevie was quietly building her own indestructible legacy. In 2019, she achieved something unprecedented. She was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a solo artist, making her the first and only woman in history to be inducted twice, once with Fleetwood Mac and once for herself. She had finally outrun the shadow of the band and stood alone in the spotlight, a queen on her own throne. The story of Stevie Nicks is etched in contradiction. Her life was a tempest of chaos, Yet her art brought a sense of serene magic to millions. She flew to the highest peaks of fame and fell into the darkest valleys of addiction and despair. She loved and lost with a ferocity that would have broken most people. But her true power was never in her witchy shawls or mystical lyrics. It was in her resilience. She took the shrapnel of her shattered relationships, her grief, and her demons and forged it into gold. Following the death of Christine McVie, Stevie has made it clear that the story of Fleetwood Mac is finally over. There will be no more reunions. But the legend of the woman who fronted it all is more powerful than ever. She wasn't just a singer in a band. She was a force of nature who survived the storm and wrote its soundtrack.